Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're jumping right back into our mission to crack the UP PGT 2016 economics paper. This is part 11, and we're going to be tackling questions 101 through 110. The goal, as always, is to not just find the answers, but to really understand the logic and the patterns behind them. Ready? Let's get started. So our first set of questions is all about decoding economic policies and acts. Now, these aren't just random facts. They're literally the rules that govern how economies work. You've really got to know this stuff. Okay, here's our first puzzle. The key phrase is unfair trade practices. When you see that, which one of these major acts should immediately pop into your head? They all sound important, but only one was specifically built to handle this. Got your answer? And the answer is C, the MRTP Act. That stands for the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act. This was a really big deal back in 1969. Essentially, its whole purpose was to stop companies from getting too powerful and using unfair tactics that could hurt consumers. And a good little tidbit to remember is that it came from the K.C. Das-Gupta Commission. All right, next up is a term we hear all the time, the debt trap. It's a nightmare scenario for any country, but what does it actually mean? All these options sound pretty bad, but one of them describes the point of no return, that truly vicious cycle. And the correct answer is C. Here's the critical difference. Just borrowing to repay old loans is one thing, but when you have to start borrowing new money just to pay the interest on your old debt, that's the trap. You're not even touching the original loan amount anymore. You're just borrowing to stay afloat, and the total debt just spirals upwards. It's a key distinction. Okay, let's switch gears to international trade theory, the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. This is a classic one. What specific problem that developing countries face is this hypothesis all about? You got it if you said B, the terms of trade. The core idea here is actually pretty straightforward. Prebisch and Singer argued that over the long run, the price of the stuff developing countries export, like coffee or copper, tends to go down compared to the price of the stuff they import, like machinery. This means they have to sell more and more just to buy the same amount of goods. It's a huge hurdle for development. Sticking with the global theme, let's talk about the J-curve effect. So a country devalues its currency, hoping to make its exports cheaper and more attractive. But what happens to its trade balance right after that decision? This question is all about the short-term pain versus the long-term gain. And the answer is A. This image explains it perfectly. This is why it's called a J-curve. Right after a devaluation, the trade balance actually gets worse. That's the dip. Why? Because you're still paying for imports you already ordered, but now they cost more, and it takes time for your cheaper exports to catch on. But then, as export sales pick up, the trade balance swings back up, creating that classic J shape. All right, this one's a bit of a deep dive into the nitty-gritty of national income accounting in India. We're looking at the difference between product taxes and production taxes. You've got 4 statements here. Read through them carefully. Are they all true? Just a few? What do you think? And the answer is D. Yep, all 4 of those statements are absolutely correct. This table makes the difference really clear. Here's an easy way to think about it. Production taxes are like fixed costs. You pay them no matter how much you make, like land revenue. Product taxes are variable. They depend on the volume you produce or sell, like sales tax. A super important distinction to know. Awesome job with that first section. Now, let's move on to cracking some core economic concepts. These are the big ideas, the fundamentals that form the backbone of pretty much all of economics. First up, let's talk about inflation. What does the term menu cost refer to? You know, the name itself is a pretty massive hint here. What kind of cost are we talking about when prices are going up all the time? And it is exactly what it sounds like. The answer is B. The term literally comes from the cost a restaurant has to pay to reprint all its menus when it changes its prices. But of course, it applies to any business that has to update price tags, change catalogs, or update their website. It's a very real, tangible cost of inflation. Okay, this next one is really interesting because it's where economics and psychology meet. It's called money illusion. So we have 2 statements here. One defines it, and the other talks about how it affects the economy. Are both correct, or just one of them? The correct answer here is D. Both statements are true. Money illusion is all about focusing on the number on your paycheck instead of what that money can actually buy. So you get a 5% raise and you feel richer, but if inflation is also 5%, your purchasing power is exactly the same. Interestingly, economists believe a little bit of this illusion can actually be good for the economy because it encourages people to spend. All right, this is a question about precision. It seems straightforward, but you have to know the exact scientific definition of global warming. All of these options are related, but only one is the core definition. And the answer is D. It's that precise. While the greenhouse effect is a cause, and melting glaciers are a result, the definition of global warming itself is simply the long-term increase in the average temperature of the Earth's surface. Getting that definition right is key.
Here is a classic economics puzzle for you. So imagine the price of something changes. It could go up or down, but the total amount of money that people spend on that product stays exactly the same. What does that tell us about its demand elasticity?
That specific scenario describes C, unitary elastic demand. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. For the total spending to stay flat, any percentage increase in price must be perfectly offset by the same percentage decrease in the quantity people buy. That one-to-one relationship is the definition of unitary elasticity. Okay, here's our final question for this round, and it's a bit technical. We're talking about the famous Cobb-Douglas production function. For this specific function, what is the elasticity of substitution? This is one of those properties that you just kind of have to know for the exam. And the magic number is C, 1. For the Cobb-Douglas function, the elasticity of substitution is always equal to 1. It's a key property of this model that you should definitely memorize. What it basically means is that there's a constant and consistent trade-off between the inputs, like labor and capital. And that's all 10 for this set. We've covered a ton of ground, from specific acts to broad global theories. So after breaking all of these down, what's the big picture takeaway? What's the code we've cracked for our exam prep? Well, looking back, it's clear the exam tests a really good mix of knowledge. You absolutely have to know your key regulations. You need a solid handle on those major macro and international concepts. And as we saw again and again, knowing the precise definitions can be the difference between a right and wrong answer. The code is clear. You need both broad and deep knowledge. So the final question I have for you is, now that you've seen this pattern, what area are you going to focus on mastering next? Thanks for decoding these with me. I'll see you in the next part.